Hello and welcome to the Post Cafe. My name is Corey Tedrow. The Post Cafe is a place where we get to sit down with various members of the global post-production community and talk with them about what they do, how they do it, and give them a chance to share their experience and insight into the ever-evolving world of post-production. Today's episode is entitled Global Production, and I'm joined by producer Peter Phok, editor David Kashevaroff, and assistant editor Scott Milligan. Welcome, Peter, David, and Scott.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Whew, I got through the names.
Yeah, you did.
I think in addition to me pronouncing your names properly, the other difficult part of this interview was just coordinating everybody's schedules. We have Scott joining us from New Zealand, and Peter and David are in LA, and I am zooming in from my home in Somerville, Massachusetts, which is on the East Coast of the US. Before we jump into me asking a lot of questions, do you want to tell us a little bit about, maybe introduce yourselves and who you are, and tell us a little bit about your role in this production? Peter, why don't we start with you?
So I'm a producer of about 15 years in independent film, particularly in the horror thriller genre, working on a new movie that has been shooting in New Zealand and working with these fine gentlemen in the capacity of post-production supervisor, as well as an EP on the film. Got to meet them virtually, and only virtually, actually, to this day.
Really? Oh, wow.
Yeah. As we, kind of like forged a path in working together on this kind of global scale.
There's going to have to be, at the end of everything, some meetup, some party where you all get together in person.
Yeah, we're all going to New Zealand.
That's right.
So David, how did you get on board?
I'm the editor. I'm the editor on this project. This is my first time working with Ty West, who's directing this movie. I think it's the first time Ty's worked with an editor. I think he's always cut his own films. Huh. We worked together on them for Amazon Prime, which is where we sort of met.
Scott, as you said, you're in New Zealand, and we haven't really talked much about the actual production and the technical details, but you're with all the stuff. You're with where the equipment is and the production is happening, correct?
Yeah, so all the material's coming to me, and I guess I'm shuffling off smaller files off to David so he can actually work. But all the big things come to me. Does
anyone want to give a quick overview of what your actual cloud workflow is?
So we have a drive with all of the material arrives to me here at Park Road Post in New Zealand. I move that onto a RAID, back everything up, and then I move DNX HD media over to Avid EOD using File Catalyst. On average, it takes about an hour for me to move the media over there. During that time, I organize the metadata, and then I move the bins over to Avid EOD. David can then start working. The rest of the time, doing outputs, doing turnovers and things. Some of that I can do on Avid EOD. For more complicated things, I bring it here locally and organize it.
I should probably say for the viewers at home, EOD or Edit on Demand is basically a cloud-based nexus with media composers attached. So you basically have a little post house in the sky that everyone can access remotely. New Zealand is where you're shooting, and was that decision made in response to COVID?
Yeah, certainly COVID had to do with it. We are shooting New Zealand for the United States, and the beauty of New Zealand is that it offers so many different sort of landscapes. So we were, really fortunate to be able to launch this production there. Once that was decided, then it was just a matter of figuring out, well, how do we approach post-production and editorial kind of concurrently with production in an effort to make sure that, we're capturing everything that we need.
Lots of movies are shot somewhere different than where they're actually posted. So is there anything about this workflow that's new to you guys?
Sure. Yeah. But for me, at least, I think normally if it was a feature shooting somewhere else, you'd travel with the show. In most cases. I think these days that's changing. And even if you're working on a remote workflow or a cloud-based workflow, you can stay in LA and still get dailies the next day. But the cloud-based thing is totally different.
What do you miss the most about not being in the same place?
I certainly miss being able to sit down with the editor and post supervisor, certainly. Although that is becoming more of a reality in the world we are in today. Yeah, being in the same time zone as well also helps.
Yeah, I'm the same, where I feel like the biggest thing missing is the interaction. What I miss the most, which I haven't had for the last year, is screening things in with someone other than yourself in the room and just watching it, just to feel another body in the room and how they're experiencing something. There's no sort of like immediate conversation.
Sure.
That's the hardest part for me as far as the creative part.
I've heard that from a lot of other folks that I've talked to, that being able to sit in the same room and just say like what's working, what's not working, and missing that
Yes.
connection is difficult.
Yeah. That said, with the time zone with Scott, and we haven't been able to do this very much, but just sharing a cut, like sending him something and say like, hey, what do you think of this? And having a conversation about it. We haven't really been able to do that, also because Scott's been incredibly busy, but that is also a factor of the time difference as well.
Right.
Where we don't have the end of the day where we can just sort of like, here's what I did today. Let's take a look.
Although I think with that said, like the time difference, what we've done is really adapted to it and really kind of lean into sort of the reality and take advantage of like the benefits. His day starts a few hours behind ours. We're kind of able to, engage with him and then, know that like he's going to turn some things around for us the following day. We've been using Slack for like communication, and that's been actually really helpful, just that it's there and it's easy, a bit faster in a way than your regular email. Scott and I have certainly done our fair share of kind of video hangouts as if we were in the same room. Despite being thousands of miles away, I feel I have a good sense of Scott's personality and certainly enjoy the working relationship.
So you're definitely making the most of it. It's true. That is a benefit that you're sort of have this extended day in a way.
Yeah, that is a benefit. If I finish late, then it's not late for Scott.
It's a bit like an assistant editor doing split shifts. So I've certainly worked on productions where, I come in at midday and finish quite late. And it just means, people can work right up into the last minute and then go, here, send this out.
Given the choice, would you do this again, or would you prefer like, no, I'd rather have everybody in the same place?
I think it comes down to what the production is, and ultimately we wanted a real-time response to the everyday's footage, right? The dailies. Finding a solution for David to be able to see it rather quickly. If Avid EOD didn't exist, I think there would have been an alternative kind of approach. What's exciting is, from my perspective and seeing what EOD had to offer was just that it's a cloud-based nexus. So it's a little different because, alternatively, you would have to then upload the media to a nexus on-prem somewhere, likely wherever David would be, situated. And then he would have to have an assistant editor, helping him sort of, kind of closer to that premises rather than, in this situation where we have Scott, sort of on the ground in New Zealand, able to assist, and he's able to jump into that same sort of workspace, on the Nexus.
Yeah, and there's definitely benefits to that, being able to just all connect in and not have to do the virtual sneaker netting, as it were.
Yeah, I have no drives here. I've got nothing. No big humming system, no box. It's kind of great.
Network switch humming in your ear, nothing like that.
It's quiet. It's easy. Yeah.
Oh, I've got so many over here. Do you want one? I find it's quite interesting. Really, you just need a box you can plug your monitors into now.
Yeah, I mean, just to have that option. If I had an office at home, I could potentially bounce back and forth. I could just work from wherever. I could do a few hours at home. I can come to the office, do a few more hours, go back home, finish up, and it's really simple. When
I first learned about EOD and then trying to wrap my head around what it really meant, like, we're logging into a virtual computer, the concept of like a machine that doesn't really exist, but it's, it's part of a server farm or something that boots into Windows, and then from there boots into Media Composer was pretty wild. And when you look at the specs, like, this is a high-end workstation. It's like an easier or like, kind of lower access point to getting involved with, with this world of post-production and editorial.
I think one of the benefits for Avid EOD is the fact that it's actually really multiple services all combined in one. And previously, we'd be setting up our own thing with Jump, plus some other thing to move the media around, plus another thing. And all of this is brought together by Avid and controlled by Avid. So it makes it a lot easier for us because we're not having to manage all of that. We're actually able to focus on the work rather than just the IT support side.
It's nice to be able to just tap into that remotely. And honestly, this interview is not supposed to be a big advertisement for Avid on Demand, but I'm glad you guys are happy with it and that it's working for you.
Yeah, I was really I was excited to jump at the opportunity to try it out. I know, it's a young program, but I was really excited just that this is even an option now.
Well, a couple of years ago, I thought editing remotely just wasn't doable. This wasn't, I'd tried these things out before and it just didn't work. And all of a sudden, here we are and it's working, and I'm working with you guys in LA. It's mad. There are positives and negatives to it. I guess I can talk about the latency issue.
Sure.
So with just giving the distance between here and LA, we've got the server in Washington on the West Coast.
That's right.
And that means that there's a little bit of latency, which is just a little bit of delay between the server and here. For David, who's a bit closer, that delay isn't so bad. In fact, I'd say it's probably not really noticeable. But to New Zealand, it's just a little bit longer, and it means things are a little bit sluggish. Let's say if you drag a window around, it's just going to feel like it's going through mud a little bit. And so that means that, say if I was going to jump in and I was going to try and edit from here, it's not really going to work so well. I can do technical things, outputs, I can move bins around, I can prep things for David, but anything that requires a bit more frame accuracy, it's just going to be a bit harder. But, there are ways around that. For the system we set up, all of that, all of the frame accurate stuff, I try to do on my local machine, and then it gets onto Avid EOD. So I spend less of my day on Avid EOD than David does, which actually works fine. And it just means, David has the closer server. Yeah.
David shuts the lights off.
Yeah. Yeah, and I don't really notice latency here when everything's working as it should. It's great. Sometimes there's sluggish moments where we don't really know what happens. 90% of the day, it all works fine. At this point, I think in the beginning, we had some rough patches. We were just trying to figure everything out. But once that all got ironed out, everything is working pretty good. And I'm happy with that.
Just so many more things that can go wrong along the pipe. It's not just Avid EOD, you've got your internet service provider as well. So if things aren't right there, then it's just not going to work. Ideally, you need to be in a good facility with good internet, and then you should be fine, in theory.
Okay. Is there any other parts of the process or workflow that you want to talk about in particular?
I'll talk about screening things, which is a challenge, screening things over Zoom. I've noticed when I work with Ty, there's a little bit of lag over time. It's hard to sort of we can't really be frame accurate when we're talking about things. We haven't tried using, hooking up through Evercast. We've only tried Zoom, and I imagine Evercast is a little better. That is hard, sort of watching something with somebody and communicating over whichever way you're going to communicate. I prefer, I guess, at this point, just doing outputs and screening those things. It just also looks better and sounds better.
Right.
When you're working on a theatrical feature thing, and you want to see it big and, hear it loud, and it's difficult to not see this movie on a bigger screen and louder and sort of imagine it that way. And I'm sure that's probably hard for the director as well on the other side of the world. But at the same time, he's on the other side of the world and we're doing this, which is pretty amazing.
When does production wrap for you folks?
A few days.
That's right. And then because the opportunity to work with vendors in New Zealand exists, including Park Road Post, they'll be doing our DI in color. And so the intention is to kind of lock picture, with Ty in New Zealand. So the entire editorial will take place, with Ty in New Zealand. And then we'll go to color. And also visual effects are being worked on with the New Zealand vendors as well.
David will finish the cut in LA, but then all of the finishing will be done in New Zealand.
Yes.
And then sound will come back to California.
That's very cool. Very exciting.
From our experience, what this has taught us is that, it is possible. If you're willing, there is a way to do it. And, we certainly are proof of that.
It can be done.
That's right.
All right. Well, Peter, David, Scott, thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate you taking the time out of your afternoon, mornings Really appreciate it. And best of luck with the production as things wrap up.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Yes. Thank you.
And that is it for this episode of the Post Cafe. Thanks so much for joining us. Be safe out there. Bye-bye.